UFC Vegas 82 happened over the weekend. If you haven't seen my last video, go check that out. It's a recap on all the fights. Went through each one, talked about all the finishes, everything that happened on the card. I gave out my own bonuses and awards, so go check that out if you haven't seen it. But now we've got some matchmaking to do. We're doing everybody you see in front of you. CLD, JSP, Joanderson Brito, Mictabek Oralby, Mando Ribas, Peyton Talbot, Chase Hooper, Michael Morales, and then the main event, Paul Craig, Brendan Allen. Brendan Allen took the dub. They're both getting a match made for him, though. First up, we've got CLD. He's had a bit of a weird UFC career so far. He comes into the UFC, Cage Warriors champion. A lot of high expectations for him. His first UFC fight in his debut, he's taking on Dusko Todorovic. Todorovic hurts his knee very quickly into the fight within like the first 2 or 3 minutes, so we don't really get to see the fight play out. Nothing really happens. Nothing really develops. It's kind of a dud because we didn't get to see anything. Second fight, comes out, takes on Armen Petrosyan, gets out kickboxed. Really didn't see much from him in that fight. Third fight, he's supposed to be taking on another kickboxer like Armen Petrosyan off of Contender Series, but in Cesar Almeida, who's been in there with some good guys, Alex Pereira for one, and that fight doesn't happen. Cesar Almeida can't make it to the cage for whatever reason. I can't remember if it was an injury or if he was sick, but something happens. He can't make it to the cage. And we get Dennis Talulin stepping in on short notice. And that fight, it doesn't really tell you a whole lot because a guy with, or a touted prospect like CLD, somebody who's got a lot of hype around him, coming in, the Cage Warriors champion, should dismantle somebody like Dennis Talulin, and he did. The combination to finish him with the elbow to elbow was so sick, but again, he should be doing that against a guy like Dennis Talulin. So I need to see him in a fight against somebody like Armen Petrosyan where he's able to go out there and battle and win. And I don't know if this fight I'm making, maybe he blows this guy out of the water, maybe this guy shuts him out like Armen Petrosyan did, who knows. But the wins he has so far in his UFC career hasn't really told me much about him. Still waiting to see something from him in a win that's spectacular. Obviously this knockout was great, but like I said, that's something he should be doing against Dennis Talulin, a guy who's struggled a bit, 2-3 in the UFC, 3-fight losing streak, and that 3-fight losing streak against Mikhail Olajacek, Albert Duraev, and RoboCop. So he's been in there versus some tough guys, Chidi and Jokwani. I think this would be an interesting fight because they kind of have, not exactly, but sort of the same builds. They're both quite tall, lanky guys who use their distance pretty well. Both like to do work in the clinch, both good with elbows, knees in the clinch, very long distance strikers. So I think this would be a fun one. CLD, we still haven't really seen it. We saw it in Cage Warriors, a decent bit of offensive grappling. He's not like a crazy offensive grappler or anything. He wants to go out there and pick you apart at range, but he does have the ability, so maybe he goes out there and he can get it working versus Chidi and Jokwani. Maybe Chidi and Jokwani is too much for him, picks him apart at range. I'm not sure. This is a fight, though, that I would like to see. We need to see Christian Leroy Duncan tested in a win. And I think this is a winnable fight if he goes out there and fights at his best, but it's also a tough fight. So with where Chidi is in his career, the guys he's faced, it is a tough challenge for CLD, and I'd love to see him take it. Hopefully, it would be a banger. And I just, like I said, I think we need to see him in a win get tested because I said it already, these wins haven't taught me anything. So I think this would be an interesting fight. Next one for sure in my mind. Next up, JSP. He had a tough go in this last fight, taking on Joanderson Brito. It felt like he was cruising to a victory. And I'm not going to go over the whole fight, like I said. I did a recap video. Go check that out if you haven't seen it. But it looked like he was going to be able to go out there and wrestle Brito to a decision. Maybe Brito gasses out late, and he finds the late finish. We get into the second round. They're going back and forth, talking to each other a little bit, chirping. And I don't know what made him angry. I can't remember what it was, but something happened where they started chirping at each other. JSP tells him to get up and do something about it, and Brito in turn gets up and does something about it. He stood up, he gets out of this takedown under from the bottom, and just as the whole fight had been going, JSP shoots for another takedown to try and get him back down, but this time JSP gets his head stuck in a bad spot he cannot get it out of. Great submission win for Brito, and it looked like he was going to need a finish of some sort because he was definitely going to go on and get wrestled to a decision, most likely. But we come out of that, JSP loses very close to the rankings. It felt like if he got that win, he was probably going to get an attempt at a ranked opponent next. Obviously, I don't think it would have made him ranked, but an attempt at a ranked opponent next. Somebody who I think was in quite a close similar situation was Nathaniel Wood. Comes up from 135 pounds, comes up from 135 to 45, rattles off 3 wins at featherweight, and then he's taking on Muhammad Naimov. Obviously, with a win, I don't think it's kind of same with Brito, Naimov and Brito. I don't know if it gets him either of those guys a ranked fight, but it gets him closer. But with these two guys, I think a win would have gotten them a ranked attempt at least. And Nathaniel Wood, in a tough decision, probably ref could have taken a few points from Naimov. Doesn't happen. Nathaniel Wood goes out there and loses a close decision. So both of these guys feel quite close to the rankings, and with another win or two, could bounce back and then have that opportunity, maybe with like a third win after 2 to get a ranked attempt, not be ranked, but a ranked attempt at least. So I felt this was a good matchup. Another guy that popped into my head, kind of not in a similar situation, but just feels like it fits into a group with these two guys, is Jack Shore. I believe, I didn't write it down for him, I don't think, but I think he's got 1 loss in the UFC. His last fight was a win versus Amir Khani up at featherweight, so I think you could do Jack Shore versus JSP also, or even Jack Shore versus Nathaniel Wood, but any of those 3 guys. I think this one makes the most sense, though, just because they both felt like they were so close to the rankings and 1 loss. So whoever wins, probably right back in the conversation to not get ranked, but get a ranked fight. So whoever wins this fight would need to rattle off probably 1 or 2 more, and then they'd be real close again. But these guys don't feel off, and don't feel far off from the rankings. It not done dirty, but it both feels like they were so close and got it kind of yanked out right from under him. So I think this is the next matchup to make for both these guys. Maybe Jack Shore. I don't mind that one either. Next up, the man who crashed that party for JSP, Joe Anderson Brito. Like I said, fantastic submission. I was on the JSP side. It felt like the right side. Everybody on the JSP side knew Brito needed a Hail Mary finish, and he got it. So, but with that win, it didn't feel like Brito deserves a ranked fight quite yet. I think he's rattled off now 4. It's Feely, 2 kind of lesser guys, or not, I won't even say lesser, but Lucas Alexander and Weston Wilson, who I will say is lesser. That's rude, but he is. And then now JSP. I think he needs 1 more in there to really prove he's at that level, because the Andre Feely fight could have been tough, but we didn't get to see much happen. He knocked him out in like 40 seconds. And then JSP, he gets a tough fight in JSP, and he's losing the whole fight until the Hail Mary sub. So I'd like to see him get in there before we get a ranked fight with 1 more tough guy, just to kind of show he really can do it, because a pressure fighter like Bill Algeo, obviously it was Brito's debut, so you have to give him a little leeway there, but Brito comes in his debut against Bill Algeo, has trouble with the grappling, has trouble with Bill Algeo's pressure, has trouble with Bill Algeo's pace. So I want to see him, and that's kind of what was happening in the JSP fight. It felt like it was going that direction. So I want to see Brito in there versus 1 more tough guy before we talk about rankings. And I've kind of got 2 here. Billy Q is my first choice. He is, where is it? 3-2. I feel like I've matched him up pretty recently in one of my matchup videos, but whatever. I like him for this fight. 3-2 in his last 5, beating Gabriel Benitez, losing to Burgos, beating Alexander Hernandez, losing to Edson Barbosa brutally, and then most recently, he comes out and gets that win versus Dane Jackson. Is it Dane Jackson? Why can't I remember his name? I had to check. It's Damon Jackson, not Dane Jackson. I don't know why I kept saying Dane. It's a Bills player. But so he goes out there, gets that win, and he was a guy also who got that ranked attempt versus Edson Barbosa, got knocked out, gets a win again. So he's quite close to the rankings too. I don't know if a win over Brito would get him a ranked fight, but it would put him much closer. And I think if Brito gets this win, then we could talk about a ranked fight for him. But I follow Billy Q on Twitter. It seems like he may have something lined up. I'm not sure if he does or not, but it sounds like something may be in the works for him. And obviously it wouldn't be Brito because this fight just happened. So if this fight can't get matched up, I think Cub Swanson is a good second option. Maybe not in the same spot that Billy Q is in, but it's a tough fight versus a good veteran who's been in there with some good guys, and it would just give Brito a tough fight. So I either one, if Billy Q isn't available, this one sounds good to me. I do have some stats for Cub too. He's also 3-2 in his last 5, beating Pineda, losing to Giga, beating Elkins, losing to Martinez, and then beating Dawodu in his most recent fight in a split decision. That was a very close fight, but good on him to pull it off versus a decent young up-and-comer. So again, it's the same spot for Cub. A win probably wouldn't get him a ranked fight, but it'd be 2 in a row versus 2 good guys. And so he'd be pretty close. Him and Billy Q are kind of around the same situation, so that's why I think both of these guys make sense. But I'd love to see the Billy Q one first. I think he's probably a step closer than Cub is. But either one of these guys, if Billy Q's not available, get him in there with Cub Swanson. It doesn't feel quite right giving him a ranked fight yet. So I want to see him in there one more time versus one more tough guy, regardless of who that is between these two. Next up, newcomer, Miktebek Oralbai. Very impressive debut. Comes in at 100. He'd only fought at 170 pounds before in LFA and all that, so it's not crazy to say debut at 170 pounds. But he wants to fight at 155, so that's the matchup I made for him. But regardless, comes in 170-pound debut, short notice. I think it was like 4 days. And obviously, with wanting to go down to 155, he's obviously not a big guy, so maybe the cut wasn't the hardest probably on short notice. But he goes in there, gets hurt early versus Uros Medic, and then ragdolls him for the rest of the fight until he gets the submission. Very good debut. If you watch tape on him, if you'd see him in LFA, you knew he had that potential. Obviously, in his last 2 fights, he'd kind of fallen in love with the hands. I don't know if it was to prove a point or if he had just fallen in love with the hands in training. I don't know. But in his UFC debut, he reverts back to what he knows can get him the wins while he still sharpens up the hands. But going 255 pounds, obviously we know this guy is good. We can't throw him in there versus some scrub because he'll ragdoll him and submit him or show that he's good and can stand as well. But he's obviously shown that he's quite a good fighter. He can't get thrown in there versus a bum. A guy I think would be on his level, proven in the UFC. He's got some good wins under his belt. Kind of similar to Uros Medic, Ludovic Klein. I think this would be a fun one. And maybe not exactly similar, but just similar in the way they're both kickboxers. And on the feet, they could definitely give Miktebek a test. On the ground, Uros definitely had an issue. I believe, though, Ludovic is the better grappler than Uros, and I think that's quite obvious because Ludovic will go out there and mix in his own takedowns with his offense. 83% takedown defense, so obviously he's done pretty well so far. But we have seen him get submitted, so I just think this would be a good fight to see where Miktebek is at with the 155-pounders, because obviously you can't throw him in there versus, it's not even in the conversation, but guys right outside the rankings or in the rankings, obviously we can't do that. But a tough guy who's been in there with some good guys, has some decent wins. I think he's rattled off 4 in a row, if I'm not mistaken. Oh no, so 3 1-1. He had a draw and a win this year in 2023. That little streak, the 3-1-1 streak, win over Devontae Smith, win over Mason Jones, draw versus Jai Herbert, and then a win over Bahamundas where he mixed in the wrestling quite well. So I think this would just be a good first test at 155. We could see where Miktebek is if he can't get the takedowns against a guy like Ludovic Klein. Obviously he'll have to prove what he can do with the hands, but we know he's a relentless grappler, so it would be up to Ludovic to try and keep that one on the feet, see if he can, because I think if he can keep that on the feet, he'd have a pretty good shot here. We've seen Miktebek get hurt. Obviously, this would be at 155 pounds, though, so just interesting all around. If Miktebek could get the takedowns, if Ludovic keeps it standing, a lot of questions to be asked there. So I think this is a fun first fight for Miktebek at 155, just to see where he really would stack up versus the division. Next up, Amanda Ribas gets her win versus Luana Pinheiro. It was a tough first round. She's getting beat up, but she completely turns the table in round 2 as Luana starts to tire, puts the pace on her, puts the pressure on her, puts the hands on her, gets the 3rd round TKO finish. Great performance from Amanda Ribas. There were a few options. 2 rematches I was looking at while I was deciding on who I wanted to match make her with, and Mackenzie Dern came up. They haven't fought since 2019, and Ribas got a win in that first one, so maybe Mackenzie Dern, coming off of a loss, wants to get that one back. That was an option. And then Marina Rodriguez also beat Amanda Ribas. I believe it was by 2nd round TKO. I can't remember what round, but Marina did TKO her, so maybe Ribas wants to get that one back. But there is somebody, just for the sake of kind of mixing it up, getting some new matchups in there, getting Amanda up closer to the top 5, obviously. I think we go with the battle of the Amandas. We go Ribas versus Lemos. Lemos is coming off of a title shot to Whaley. I believe she's like 3rd or 4th ranked right now. She'd rattled off a few good wins before that. She was 4-1 in her last 5 before that fight. Wins over Angela Hill, Michelle Waterson Gomez, and Marina Rodriguez, who beat Amanda Ribas. So we can skip the what are the rematches? I don't know why I couldn't think of that word. Skip the rematches, even though I wouldn't be mad if they were made. The fights happened a little bit ago, so, and just ranking wise, they match up. It makes sense. But for the sake of a new matchup, getting Amanda up the rankings a bit quicker, I think this would be a fun fight. Lemos doesn't have anything made right now, so whenever she's ready to get back in the cage, I think Ribas would take that fight, and it would be a fun one. See if grappling versus striking. Obviously, Ribas is getting better with the hands. We've seen Lemos get subbed before by Andrade, so I don't know. This is an interesting one. Lemos trying to keep her top 5 spot. Ribas trying to move into the top 5. Whoever gets that win would definitely be in a good position at the moment. Next up, newcomer Peyton Talbot getting it done on Contender Series, then getting his first ever submission victory in his debut in the UFC, beating Nick Aguirre via round 3 submission. He's having a bit of trouble in the first round with the grappling. Obviously, he's still very green. His striking is good. Striking defense, not so much. We haven't really seen him offensively grapple except for in this fight with Aguirre, when Aguirre got tired. And the takedown defense and the get-ups are weird because his first line of takedown defense isn't great, but he gets up quite easily. He's super athletic. A lot of guys have trouble keeping him down, and that's what happened with Aguirre. Aguirre was on top, couldn't keep him down for too long. He won that round. Aguirre definitely had won that round, but he gets up. Peyton Talbot turns on the gas in round 2, starts putting the pressure on him. He knew Aguirre would tire, and he did, and breaks him. Gets the round 3 submission. And Talbot, like I said, very, very green. A lot of things to work on. He's like 24 years old. There's no reason to rush him into anything. I think a good guy to either kind of give him, I don't want to say a lesson, but just if he beat him, it would be a good thing for Talbot to go back and there would be things to work on, but also if he gets the win, it's just a good start to your career, good resume builder. Ricky Turcios, the Ultimate Fighter winner at bantamweight. He's had a weird UFC start so far. He came in, lost to Ayman Zahabi, then beats Kevin Natividad by split decision. So he's a really weird fighter, not super powerful in the hands, a lot of forward pressure, doesn't stop moving, super weird and awkward. The grappling is decent as well, so I just think this is a guy who's maybe not spectacular anywhere, but quite well-rounded, that could give Peyton Talbot a good well-rounded experience. I think it is a guy Peyton Talbot could beat for sure, but it would be interesting to see how he deals with that pressure coming from Ricky Turcios, all that volume, him mixing in the grappling. His jiu-jitsu is quite good. So I just think all around this would be a good test for Talbot as he continues to kind of learn the skills, build his arsenal. And like I said, there's no reason to rush him. Very green fighter still. It's very obvious. Nobody's trying to say he's like a superstar right now. Get him up the rank. Like there's no reason yet. Very obviously green still. So get him a few fights over the years. Build him up slowly. I think is very athletic, very talented, bright future if they do it right. So I think Ricky Turcios is a guy who, if you lose, he'll show you the holes you need, whether it's dealing with pressure, dealing with volume. Obviously, defensive grappling could be an issue for him. So it's just a guy also that won't really gas late into the fight. Obviously, Peyton Talbot is definitely going to be lighting him up on the feet, or has the ability to, but Ricky Turcios isn't a guy that'll step off his gas either. So just a good learning experience if you lose, or if he wins, that's a great performance, or a good win to have on your belt coming into the UFC, and he can continue to build from there. Either way, good experience regardless of the outcome, I believe. Next up, Chase Hooper. This is a weird one for me because he's also one of those ones where I feel is obviously still very green. On the feet, he's not the best. He can have trouble getting the fight to the ground unless the guy wants to engage with him. He's coming up from 145 pounds, 255, and he's 2-0 at lightweight right now. Beat Nick Fiore, if I'm not mistaken, and now, obviously, Jordan Levitt. 2 grapplers, so I want to see him go in there versus somebody either more well-rounded or somebody who's a striker, because, like I said, Chase Hooper's a weird one. He's still quite young as well, but you can't baby him forever. He's a guy that has to... He struggled with guys that are quite well-rounded, losing to Alex Caceres, although that was like his second UFC fight, which was crazy. Who else has he lost to? Obviously, Steve Garcia is not a very well-rounded guy, but he struggles with guys that are good on the feet. And this isn't like some spectacular matchup where the guy's elite or anything, but Jai Herbert, I think, could be a good one because although he's not the best grappler, his takedown defense is okay. Chase Hooper's a guy whose takedowns are in his strong suit, and on the feet, this is a place where Jai Herbert will have the advantage for sure. At 155 pounds, we haven't really seen Chase Hooper tested yet. It is definitely a winnable fight for him. We've seen Herbert get submitted before. We've seen Herbert had trouble off his back before, and Chase Hooper's not some guy you want to get stuck on the ground with. So I think very winnable fight for both guys, but will also be very telling for Chase Hooper to see where he is in the 155-pound division because he can't get babied forever. And obviously maybe he hasn't been babied getting tossed to Alex Caceres in his second fight, but he needs to obviously improve in the striking, and this is a matchup that'll prove he can beat strikers at 155 pounds. Obviously not all of them, but if he can get this matchup, it won't be as much of a worry knowing he can go out there and beat a striker. So I think just kind of the next test for Chase Hooper, taking a step up from Jordan Levitt. I don't know. Chase Hooper's in a weird spot right now. I feel like I still need to see something from him. So I think that's kind of what I'm doing with this matchup. Next up, Michael Morales, a guy I would give him a ranked fight next personally. I think he's obviously got the skills. Maybe you go one more fight, but these are my matchmaking matchups, so I'm giving him a ranked fight. There's two options here in my opinion. If you are in the same mind as me as he should get a ranked fight, you could go Michael Chiesa. Michael Morales is undefeated in the UFC as far as he's looked quite good in all of his fights. May not be the most exciting. Definitely needs to up his finishing prowess, his like killer instinct, but very, very technical, very patient, manages his gas tank well, can mix it up. He's a decent wrestler as well. It's just the building blocks are definitely there for a very good fighter, and he's still so young. But he's looked good so far in the UFC, beating guys like Max Payne Griffin, and obviously this last one, and Jake Matthews. Those are two solid wins, so I think we're getting close to the rankings. Maybe one more, but I think he can beat a guy like Michael Chiesa. But after Michael Chiesa's last fight, Kevin Holland, I don't know what his intentions are. He looked old. He looks like he wasn't ready for a fight. So I don't know if he's considering retirement, if he still wants to get in there and fight. I don't know what his deal is. So I think we go Michael Chiesa for Michael Morales' first test in the UFC rankings. I think it's a very winnable fight for him. But obviously, Chiesa can get you stuck in some weird situations on the ground if you're not careful. If this fight, like I said, I don't know where Michael Chiesa's head is at right now. So if this fight's not able to be made for whatever reason, I think there's another matchup coming up. Sean Brady versus Kelvin Gastelum. Gastelum's ranked like 11 at 85 right now. Brady's like 9 at 170. They're fighting coming up, I want to say, in like a week now. I'm pretty sure it's on this December 2nd card. It might also actually be on the last card of the December 16th one, but it's in December. So we've got this matchup coming up. I think you could also give Morales the loser of this fight because it'll either be the 11th ranked 185-pound guy coming off of a loss, or the 9th ranked 170-pounder coming off of a loss, who would probably move down and switch spots with Gastelum. So rankings wise, I think this fight makes sense if you're again in the same mind as me, as thinking he deserves a ranking. But all three fights, maybe not Michael Chiesa so much. I don't know. I didn't like how Michael Chiesa looked after this. I don't know again where his head is at, how he wants to play out the rest of his career, but it didn't look good to me. So I think maybe that's a bit of an easier fight than it's definitely an easier fight than the loser of this one. But I think if this is the fight they go with, the loser of Brady Gastelum for Michael Morales, I think that is a very interesting test because obviously on the feet, Sean Brady would have issues with Morales, but he's a very good wrestler. The jiu-jitsu is great. So Sean Brady poses a lot of questions there. And then on the feet, Jake Matthews is good, but I don't know if he quite has the boxing prowess that Kelvin Gastelum has. We've seen him do it in the octagon versus the best guys, Israel Adesanya, hurt guys like that. So obviously maybe not at his prime anymore, but still very talented. Could pose a lot of questions for Michael Morales in the stand-up game. Either way, fun fight. Just a way to get him in the rankings if he gets the win. Next up, we've got the main event, not the co-main. Paul Craig lost to Why can I remember his name? Brendan Allen in the main event this past weekend. And I don't know, again, another guy, I don't know, is he considering going back up to 205? Is he committing to 185 for real? Because I don't think in his mind he had lost this quickly into his 107 or 185 pound tenure, but he does. Now he's like the 13th ranked guy. I don't think he moved up or down. He just stayed where he was. And I think somebody who deserves a shot at the rankings, it's a weird one again, because I don't know, does Paul Craig get like 14 or 15? I don't know. So I would not match him up with 14 or 15. It feels like a weird spot right now. I think he has to defend his rank. And we go with Kyle Braulio, someone 5-0 in the UFC, not including his Contender Series victory. Obviously improving each fight. He talks about it every time. He wants to be one of the most cerebral fighters in there. He's obviously a very, very smart fighter with the way he strikes. His striking is always improving. And he's a guy who maybe doesn't have like the I don't even know, the wow factor on the ground like Paul Craig does, because he'll just throw up a triangle out of nowhere when he's basically knocked out. But a guy who I think could match Paul Craig on the ground, definitely. We saw Brendan Allen do it. I think if Kyle gets on top or gets in a position of dominance, he could be trouble for anybody on the ground. So I just think this is a good matchup. Kyle, in my opinion, needs to get into the rankings sooner than later. He's very talented and still very young, getting better each time we see him step in the octagon. So I think Paul Craig needs to defend his ranking, and Kyle, to me, feels like the most deserving guy in that spot just outside the rankings. Very fun fight, too. Next up, the winner, Brendan Allen, moves up. He's now I believe the 8th ranked 185 pounder. He moved just above Khamzat. And what's next for him, I think, we need to get some new blood in that top 5. It's felt quite stagnant for quite some time. We've seen Vettori fight Israel twice. Cannoniers fought Vettori. Who else is up there? Dolidze's fought Vettori. If you can't tell, I'm going with Vettori. It feels like all of these guys have fought each other, and they're just kind of rerunning all the fights. Dolidze is kind of the one sneaking his way in right now, but Brendan Allen could also be there, in my opinion. We just need some new blood. Vettori is 1-2 in his last 3, 2-3 in his last 5. Those wins are over Paulo Costa and Dolidze, but Dolidze's got to fight. Paulo Costa is probably going to fight Khamzat next, if they can ever get that matchup done. And there's no need for Vettori to fight Cannonier again. He's fought Rob Whittaker, Adesanya. There's no fights for him up in that top 5 right now, unless we want to make another rematch for him, which in my opinion doesn't make sense. And going down outside of the top 5, for now everyone's got a matchup, like Dolidze. I can't remember who 6 is, but I don't know. This one just makes the most sense. Vittori's 1-2 in his last 3. Brendan Allen moving up, deserves a fight up. Vettori, I think, has to defend his top 5 spot, and this one just makes the most sense with Dolidze being booked already. So I'd love to see this fight. I think it is definitely winnable for both guys. A very interesting fight because Vettori doesn't hit hard, but his punches thud, they're heavy. I don't know, it's weird. He doesn't swing with a lot of power, but they're heavy shots. He's just I don't even know how else to describe it other than heavy as thuds. And we've seen Brendan Allen's chin get cracked before. We saw Cannonier kind of get through to Vettori. Maybe Brendan Allen's able to finally crack that chin. And obviously, I think Vettori's a good wrestler, but on the ground, just pure all-around grappling, Brendan Allen's got a very talented game, and I think he could maybe find the sub on the ground, but I think both guys are capable of winning this fight, and we really need some new blood at the top of 185, so I think mixing Brendan Allen into that situation would be good for the whole division, kind of maybe, I don't know, we need something new. And that's all for matchmaking. No UFC this weekend, which is unfortunate, but we do have on Friday the PFL finals. I don't know if I'm going to make a video about it, but check my TikTok. It's the same name as this, Savage Rounds, and I might put up a little PFL play of the day or something. But yeah, that's all until next week on Wednesday or Thursday. I might try and get it out a bit earlier for this fight right here, December 2nd. Lightweights taking on each other. I don't know what I was going to say there. Beneil Dariush taking on Arman Tsarukyan. And then actually, Bobby Green versus Dan Hooker is canceled. Dan Hooker pulled out, so hopefully they can find someone for Bobby Green. But yeah, other than that, drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week for predictions and bets for this card. Peace.